All right, last call for Northwest High School or Kadoka Middle School. If you are either Northwest High School or Kadoka Middle School, please unmute your microphone and say hello. All right, the program is going to begin in a few minutes, so please stand by.
There you go. I think you guys need to say
hello. Hi, what school is this?
This is Kadoka.
All right, great, wonderful, Kadoka. Have you been hearing everything I've said earlier about what to expect during the program? Keep your microphone muted. Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you so much. So go ahead and mute your microphone, and we're going to begin in about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Living in Extreme Environments. My name is Ryan Schaefer and I'm coming to you live from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'd like to welcome 3 schools this afternoon. We have Magnolia High School from Magnolia, Texas joining us. We also have Northwest High School from Justin, Texas joining us. And we also have Kadoka Middle School joining us all the way from Kadoka, South Dakota. There's also a number of people watching via the web. So welcome one and all. Now you've all heard of outer space, right? Well, today, instead of taking you to outer space, we're going to be visiting inner space. That's right, about 60 feet under the ocean is a habitat called Aquarius. And in about 15 minutes, we will actually join an aquanaut who's living inside Aquarius as we speak. But first, I thought it'd be good for all of you to watch an interview I did a couple weeks ago with some engineers who are directly involved with NASA's Extreme Environment Mission Operations, better known as NEMO.
I'd like to welcome 2 special guests to our studios today. Could you 2 introduce yourselves and give the students out there a better idea of how you'll be involved with NEMO 14?
Sure. Absolutely. Hi guys, I'm Heather Paul. I'm a mechanical engineer that works here at the NASA Johnson Space Center. I've been out here for about 14 years, and this year I have the fantastic opportunity to work with NASA's Extreme Environments Mission Operations Project. That is the NEMO activities.
My name is Amanda Knight, and I'm also a mechanical engineer. I've been out here at NASA Johnson Space Center for about 6 years now, and this too is my first opportunity, and I'm very, very excited about it.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. I guess to begin, Heather, could you give us a brief explanation of the NEMO program?
Absolutely. Well, it's pretty cool, Ryan, because we get to go to Key Largo, Florida for a couple of weeks in May, where we're going to be working with a crew of 6 in the underwater Aquarius habitat. So that crew of 6 is comprised of a NASA astronaut, a Canadian Space Agency astronaut, 2 scientists/engineers, and then 2 habitat technicians. And they're going to be going out to the Aquarius habitat, which is about 60 feet underwater, for 2 weeks to do an underwater Aquarius mission. And that's really NEMO 14. Lots of great activities, doing spacewalks, doing science objectives, engineering tasks, and overall fantastic opportunity.
Well, thank you, Heather.
Sure.
I guess it might help the students, though, if we actually show them how the Aquarius habitat works. And I think we actually have a demonstration that we want to show them in order to explain some of the science involved with living underwater. So what are we seeing here?
Okay, so right now what we have is basically a tank of water, which we're going to pretend is our ocean right now, and the bottom would be about 60, 62 feet down. Okay. And here we've got our glasses, which we'd like to pretend is our Aquarius habitat, right?
That's right.
So here we go. We're submerging the Aquarius down into the water, down to about 60 feet.
And there's an air bubble in there.
That's right. There's the air bubble. What would happen, you think, if we let go of that cup right now? There's so much pressure inside of it, it would just shoot up like a rocket. So one of the things that we are very mindful of when we have this Aquarius down that far underwater is that we want to make sure that the internal pressure where the crew is living inside the habitat is the equal as the water outside of it.
And even if we add an entrance,
Okay.
a hole
Right.
in this cup.
We've got to get in and out, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's true. So
now we have what we would consider our airlock so that the aquanauts can actually go from inside the habitat outside to do their EVAs. And it's still very much the same thing. They're able to maintain the pressure inside and still be able to get outside to do their work as long as the pressure is equalized both internally and externally.
I see. So lots of science involved with living under the ocean.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And now I think it would be even better if we actually show the students what the real Aquarius looks like. So let's go ahead and take a private tour of Aquarius.
All right.
Hello, my name is Dewey Smith, and welcome to Aquarius. I'm one of 2 habitat technicians. My job down here is to make sure that the aquanauts are safe, healthy, and being productive down here, and we'll have a successful mission. We're going to start the tour here, as you see, in the bunk room. These are where the 6 aquanauts sleep. It's pretty close and cozy, but it does the job. We don't spend much time in here, so there's a lot of space. This is where we keep all of our clothes and goodies and books for the crews here. If you look forward here right underneath the viewport and right underneath the grouper, we do have a workstation here. It's a fold-down station with a laptop with internet capabilities, and that's for anyone to use. And we'll go ahead and come on out here into the main lock, and over here to the right here, our starboard side, we're actually looking towards the bow, or through the bow, to the bow of the habitat. And on the starboard side, starting as a camera, which the watch desk has a constant eye on us 24/7 during a mission. We do have another workstation here. This is for me and the other habitat technician, Buckley. And this is where we have a live chat to the watch desk. So if anything happens, we have a live chat to them, as well as a barrage of phones. We have digital, landline, cell phone. And as we carry on through here, we have a depth gauge here, which shows us that we are at 47 feet of salt water. We have a bunch of monkeys here. Also, some of the aquanauts. We got aquanauts coming back from a dive. They're eating and getting their meals ready, getting warmed up after the dive. Underneath that depth gauge, we have our sensors that show the oxygen, temperature, humidity, CO2, and CO readings and alarms there. Further back, we have our air distribution. This is where we get our atmospheric makeup. We have a 30 cubic foot bleed going on right now, and followed by our electrical panel, which has a bunch of buttons and switches there. That's how we get lights, camera, and action. We have another station here with another computer that also has internet connect. Back on the other side, to the port side, we'll see people eating, enjoying the loads of food that we have down here. We have a regular sink and utensils and a microwave like you would at any kitchen. And we'll carry on through into the entry lock. We'll see another couple aquanauts here hiding out. You can't run from those guys. We'll also have the same thing as I pointed out in the main lock. It's mimicked here. The electrical panel, air distribution panel. Right on. How'd the dive go, guys? All right. Good deal. No problem at all. All right, and this is a final space here. It's actually where it begins is in the wet porch. And the camera may fog up on us, but we'll try to keep it clear for you so you guys can see what's going on in here. This is where the power and air come through into this space right here. We have an air distribution panel, as we saw in the main lock and entry lock. This is how we distribute it inside. And if you can see through these, you can see the moon pool. We do have some gear drying. This is where all their gear is staged. This is where we stage out and do our dives and all the work. This is why we're here. The shower is a small space, but it gets the job done. Hopefully you can see that. And there's also another camera in here that is a direct link to the watch desk, and they can watch us from here too. Thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and sign out. And thank you for listening and watching, and we will see you guys soon, hopefully out in the water. Good night.
Well, that's certainly a fascinating facility, Heather.
It's awesome.
But, you know, when people think of NASA, they think of launching really big rockets, and they think of astronauts floating in the station.
Sure.
And that's really different than what we're seeing taking place at NEMO. So, Heather, can you give the students a better indication of some of the differences between living in outer space as opposed to under the ocean?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, when we think about NASA, we don't think about going underwater unless we're doing a simulation or a training at one of our training facilities. So what NEMO 14 allows us to do is it's an analog activity, or it's analogous to what we would experience living in outer space. And there's definite differences because obviously you're at high pressure underwater and you're at low pressure or in a vacuum environment in space. But there's more similarities, and that's why we do the NEMO 14 activities. So for instance, living inside of a habitat, that's just like living in the space station, except it's actually a much smaller volume. So the Aquarius habitat is about the size of the Zvezda module that we have on the International Space Station. And we're looking at the psychological and scientific and medical aspects of having a crew of 6 living in a volume of that, a space of that volume, seeing how they interact, live, and work together. So that's one of the aspects of our NEMO activities. And then, of course, we have EVAs, or extravehicular activities. So just like we do EVAs or spacewalks outside of the space station to maintain the habitat, maintain the station, we do the same things with our Aquarius habitat, where our crew will go outside every morning and afternoon to do a spacewalk. So they'll be checking on the habitat, but they'll also be doing specific scientific and engineering objectives, just like we would do on a real space mission.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, Heather, can't you weigh the scuba suit in a certain way to model different planetary surfaces?
Absolutely, and that's a really critical part of what we're trying to do, because as we design our spacesuits, really what we're interested in looking at is how the crew moves, how they feel, is it easy or hard to move around, and to what extent do they have to compensate or change the way they would do a movement to successfully execute their activities while doing the spacewalk. And that's especially critical when you talk about going to the moon or on to Mars, a planetary surface where you're going to have gravity. So what we do with NEMO is we can weigh you out depending on what gravity level we're trying to simulate. So we can make you neutrally buoyant where you float in the water column, just like you would in microgravity, or we can attach weights to you and weigh you down to 1/6 gravity or 1/3 gravity to simulate lunar or Mars gravity environments. And that's exactly what we're doing on several of our EVAs this time.
I see, and it's a specialized kind of suit. I mean, it's not just a normal, regular scuba suit. This is some pretty advanced materials that you're using.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not as advanced as the extravehicular mobility unit that we have in space, but it is a special wear, special gear that the aquanauts will be wearing.
I see. Well, Amanda, there's some other similarities, I guess, between NEMO and the International Space Station.
Right.
I think isolation is one of them.
Definitely. Isolation is a big one. Not too many people realize, the different kinds of challenges that actually come about by having 6 people live in a very, very, very small environment. And that's something that happens not only on station, but is what we're also simulating and mimicking down here in the NEMO 14. So there is that isolation aspect, as Heather mentioned, trying to look at the psychological differences, impacts, so on and so forth. Also, one of the other similarities that we have is the mission control. So whereas the aquanauts in NEMO, they're able to talk to each other, there's not necessarily someone that they can just reach out to and be like, oh, I need some help. Well, they can talk to mission control, which is, up on Key Largo, but it would simulate very much what we have here at Johnson Space Center when our astronauts are out in space living on the space station. There is that difference, and for 2 weeks, our aquanauts are submersed underwater. They are communicating just the same way that the astronauts would out in space.
I see. So lots of planning goes into NEMO.
Absolutely.
And I think,
A little bit.
I think one of the things that is focused upon is robotics, really, right?
Definitely.
So Heather, can you talk a little about all of the robotics research that's being done at NEMO?
Sure, absolutely. And robotics is a pretty key element. When we're talking about human space exploration, it's not just humans. You need some robotic assistance so that it's really a great partnership between human and machine. And so when you're developing robotics, it's important to figure out how you communicate back and forth with your robotics and how you would perhaps control it. So for instance, using a remote operated vehicle or driving a rover out unmanned before we put humans inside to go off and explore the lunar traverse and terrain. That's a really key aspect. And in fact, we're definitely doing those kinds of things with NEMO during our spacewalk activities.
And these robotics could be a rover like you mentioned.
Right.
So I think the acronym that we use is ROV, Remotely Operated Vehicle.
Sure.
What size do they come in? I mean, are they small or do they get bigger than that?
It really depends on what you're trying to do with the ROV. So we do have a mock-up of one of our lunar traverse rovers that you would actually sit in and drive, but then we do have a much smaller, it's about, this big, kind of a small little guy, that's our remote operated vehicle. And so it just really depends, Ryan, on what you're trying to do. We have robotic assistants that need to be very small so that they can move quickly. Say, for instance, if you wanted them to go out and scope the lunar terrain and look at different geological or rock structures. But then you might need something bigger if you need to, say, drill into the lunar surface or go take your habitat somewhere else on the lunar or Martian surface.
That's very good information. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heather and Amanda. And I hope you two accomplish many, many things during NEMO 14.
Thank you so
very
much.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
All righty, students. I hope you enjoyed that interview as well as that tour through Aquarius. And now is the time to actually speak with a real live aquanaut who's living under the ocean just off the Florida Keys. So is there an aquanaut on the line?
Yes, hi, this is Steve Chappell talking to you live from Aquarius off the coast of Key Largo.
Well, good afternoon, Steve. We have 3 schools joining us for this program. We have Magnolia High School from Magnolia, Texas. We have Northwest High School from Justin, Texas. And we also have Kadoka Middle School from Kadoka, South Dakota. They are very anxious to learn more about the NEMO program. There's a number of questions that they want to ask you. But before we do that, I thought it'd be good for you to give the students out there a better indication of what the NEMO program is and what your role is in all of this.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. And the NEMO program stands for NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. And we're currently on the 14th mission for NEMO. It's basically a way that NASA can operate in an extreme environment that's what's called an analog of exploration of space. So a place here on Earth that we could go to and train astronauts and develop systems and techniques for what it will take for us to explore further into the solar system and provide also a environment in which we're working in a fairly confined space, isolated, similar to how you would be working in a habitat or a vehicle in space. My involvement with the mission this is the first mission that I've been involved with. I was actually involved in planning a lot of the mock-ups and other things that are being used by our team down here. And it's been a great productive mission so far, and we're looking forward to the last week here where we'll wrap things up and then head back to the surface.
I see. So it sounds like you guys are doing some very important research that will actually perhaps be beneficial for the students that are in school today as they grow up and enter many different careers. Now, I think we can go ahead and start asking questions, if that's okay. We're going to start with Magnolia High School. So if you guys can go ahead and open your mic up and ask our aquanaut your first question, that'd be great.
Okay, hello?
Is it chicken soup?
Okay, I'll ask. Okay, how long did it take to design the Aquarius?
Well, I don't know if I can speak to the design aspect, but it's been in operation for about 23 years. and it was originally located in a different location than it is now. It was down in the U.S. Virgin Islands for a few years, and then some hurricanes came through, and at that time they picked the opportunity to bring it up and do some refurbishing of it, and eventually moved it here to the Marine Sanctuary here off of Key Largo, where it's been ever since.
Very interesting, and there's been many NEMO missions there's been many NEMO missions through the years, and hopefully more to come. Let's go ahead and trudge along and have Northwest High School open up their mics so you can ask a question.
My name is John Fleehammer, and I was wondering, how often do you resupply, or do you have all your supplies down there with you?
Hi, John. I'd be glad to answer that question. Before we got down here for the mission, they did bring a fair number of supplies down to stock up the habitat prior to our arrival. But we do have the capability to bring more supplies down or to take things back to the surface as needed, and that's done by boats and ships that are up here that support us from the surface. They come out and basically moor up to some lines that are above us, and they can send divers down with vessels basically called pots that they can seal and bring down, and then once we open them in here, we can take out what's needed, and vice versa. We can send things back to the surface, such as scientific samples, blood samples, saliva samples, or other things.
I see, Steve. And has the food been really good lately?
The food has been pretty good. For anybody who's familiar with backpacking, the largest portion of what we eat is actually backpacker type food that's dehydrated, and we rehydrate it with hot water here, and turns out to be quite good. Plus we have a small refrigerator that we can keep fruits and vegetables and other things that to supplement that. It's been pretty good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you guys aren't starving down there. Let's go ahead and go to Kadoka Middle School for the very first time. What is your first question to Steve?
How do you get electricity down in the Aquarius? Do you use generators?
Hi, Kadoka. Yes, we do use generators, but not here within the habitat. We have what's called a life support buoy, which is moored above us by a bunch of moorings that come down to the sand, and it's attached to us by an umbilical, and through that umbilical comes our communications, our power, and part of our air supply, our main air supply. So there are a set of generators up in that buoy that run just to provide us with that power.
I see, and that's a very important aspect of the safety measures taken during the NEMO program. So that buoy is a very, very important part of the mission. Now, these aquanauts are staying underwater for nearly 2 weeks, and Magnolia High School actually has a good question about that. So, Magnolia, can you ask your next question, please?
My name is Cassie, and what type of psychological changes are there to the body after being at the pressure inside the Aquarius?
Cassie. Shut up.
Hi, Cassie. Was that question psychological changes or physiological changes?
Physiological.
You told me the wrong.
Copy that. Okay. So that's actually one of the things that are being studied on us here, and the reason why that we're doing some of the experiments with blood samples that are taken down here, as well as saliva samples, to try to look at what those changes are over time. And they're doing the same scientists that are studying our effects, the effects on us here, are studying the effects on astronauts who go up on space shuttle flights or to ISS. And some of those changes are based around immunological type changes, changes to our blood supply in terms of how many red blood cells that we have, and and that's some of the similar effects that we see here in terms of decrease in red blood cells and a decrease in our immune response are very similar to what you see on a space mission. So that's why it's such a good environment for learning more about how the body reacts to these types of situations.
I see, Steve, and I guess that's, again, a good example of the analog research that NEMO does. There's so many more things to learn from medical research underwater, and it also relates to some of the medical aspects of living in outer space. So some very, very important analog research happening. I'm sure we'll learn more about some of the other analog research as we go along today. But let's go to Northwest High School, because they, I think, have a question about the pressure that you might experience. Northwest, are you there?
Yes. My name is Jonna Martin, and I'm wondering how much water pressure do the aquanauts endure with their depth, and do you have to have a special thickness of materials used on Aquarius to endure this pressure?
Hi, Northwest. Yes, we endure about 2.5 times the normal pressure at sea level, and that equates to around 40 or 45 or so pounds per square inch, or about a third more than you might get, say, when you're pumping up your car tire. The Aquarius itself is built out of steel. It's a cylindrical design. It's about 14 meters long and 3 meters across, and it's built to handle those types of pressures. In terms of the other equipment that we use when we're outside diving, we generally use standard dive equipment that's based upon what the Navy has used for many years for their deep sea diving equipment, and it's called a Superlight 17 dive helmet that provides us our breathing air, and you can see the video as well as hear us talking back and forth, and it really keeps the head mostly dry, and then we wear just normal scuba wetsuits to supplement that and keep us warm.
Very, very interesting, Steve. I'm sure students would like to hear that, especially if they want to get involved with NOAA or NASA in the future. But let's go ahead and keep trudging along, because we have a lot more questions to get to. Kadoka Middle School, you're up next, so go ahead and unmute your mic and ask Steve a question.
What do you study while in the Aquarius, and what was your favorite mission working with Nemo?
Well, in terms of my favorite mission, this is the only one I've been involved with so far, so it's certainly my favorite. But in terms of what we're studying, when we're inside, we're studying a lot of the things I've already talked about in terms of the effects on the human body and stress, the stress levels and other things that living in an environment like this brings to the team members. But outside, what we're doing is we're wearing a suit that allows us to put different weights on our body, as well as a backpack type of rig that allows us to wear mass and move mass around on us, so that it simulates wearing a backpack with different dimensions and weight, and also is a simulant of either being on the moon or Mars, basically a reduced gravity environment. So we can go outside and do things that we would do on another planet, such as working around rovers or landers, or shoveling, just rock collection, geologic sampling, and under all these different conditions with different masses and gravity and simulated gravity levels and backpack sizes, we can compare those and then hopefully find out. The goal is to find out which one is going to allow us to perform all these necessary activities in a way that we can optimize our performance and in terms of comfort and efficiency. So when we're outside, we're wearing these rigs and doing all these different activities many times under different conditions to try to help design the spacesuits and space vehicles of the future.
I see, and I'm sure you have simulated Martian gravity as well as lunar gravity, but I'm curious to know if you've ever, during NEMO 14, simulated any other gravitational fields on any other planetary surfaces.
We have not as yet, but there's a few more dive days coming up, and one of those dive days is going to be dedicated to very low gravity levels, such as you might experience with an asteroid or a moon of Mars, such as Phobos, which is very similar to almost zero-G. But there are unique challenges associated with working around objects that don't keep you on them very easily. So how do you secure yourself to an asteroid if you want to explore it, for instance, if it doesn't hold you down to it itself? We're looking forward to that experience and what we'll learn from it.
All right, I'm sure you are. I'm sure that's going to be some very important research that takes place, because NASA certainly will want to visit Mars one day, and even some of the asteroids that are further out from Mars. But Magnolia High School is going to come along again because they have another question for you. Magnolia, go ahead.
Oh. Hi, my name is Gwyn Chin. How long does it take for your body to adjust to the pressure?
Well, immediately when we come in, you notice some things immediately, such as your voice sounds different down here. My voice is usually lower down here because the air is thicker. Your vocal cords vibrate differently, and your voice sounds different. Other thing, just if you drop a piece of paper, it will take longer to hit the ground because the air is thicker. Things like that. But so those are some of the immediately noticeable things. But in terms of our body adjusting, it starts to happen pretty quickly because of the higher pressure. There's more oxygen getting to our lungs more quickly, so our body starts to understand that by reducing red blood cells and other things, so that it doesn't think it needs them because it's getting the oxygen it needs without them. So that happens over a few days and starts to baseline, and then we'll have to readjust to normal breathing air once we get out.
I see. So that's really fascinating information. I think I sure would like to be an aquanaut one day. Maybe I'll have to study or go back to school and learn how to dive. But one of the curious things that I've always found fascinating is something about how you enter and exit the Aquarius habitat. And actually, Northwest High School has a question about that. So, Northwest, can you go ahead and open your mic and ask the question, please?
What is the difference between being on land and underwater, like the body pressure and all that? And is there a double door system to enter and exit to keep water out, or what do y'all use?
I didn't quite catch the first part of that question, but I'll answer the second part. There is multiple doors here so that we can separate the habitat into different pressure vessels and as necessary in order to do decompression in one at different pressure levels. But mainly when we're down here, those doors are open, and what we have is basically what's called a moon pool, or that's in our what we call area called with a wet porch. So it's open, basically a pool like you would see in anywhere else. But what keeps the water from coming up into the habitat is the pressure that's being held here inside the air pressure. So it's kind of like taking a cup and putting it in a bathtub upside down with air trapped in it, and if you hold it underwater with the bottom down, that air will stay trapped in it. So we can enter and exit the water just through the normal pool, kind of like getting into a swimming pool and coming back out, as long as we keep the air pressure inside the habitat. Oh, looks like we have a visitor here, and this is one of our habitat technicians, our professional aquanaut. His name is Nate. He's here to say hi, and he'll wave to you. Got a wave. He is a professional aquanaut here. He and James Talasek Nate Bender and James Talasek keep this place running for us and know how to do all the real stuff to make this place work. So we're glad to have them. So yeah, entering and exiting the water is pretty easy as long as we keep the air pressure up in here. It's just like going in and out of a pool.
That's right, Steve. And we actually, when we showed the students when we first connected, we showed them an interview I did with Heather, Paul, and Amanda Knight, where we actually did do the demonstration that you mentioned, where you try to put a cup or you try to place a cup in some water, and there will be some airspace inside of it, similar to the to Aquarius habitat. You'll have to thank Nate next time you see him inside. I think that's really special whenever a diver can come by and say hello. But let's go to Kadoka Middle School because they have an interesting question. I understand that you guys will be, you're almost to the point where you're going to be wrapping up NEMO 14, but you still have some days left. I think Kadoka wants to learn more about what may happen as you go to the top side. Kadoka,
When you
are you
first
there?
come back up after the 2 weeks that you spent underwater, does it feel different or take a while to get used to be on land again?
Well, since I've not lived down here before, I can't speak to that yet. I can speak to it in a few days, but I'll bet it is going to feel different. Like I said earlier, our voices are going to sound different. The air is not going to feel as humid and thick as it does down here. It just kind of how it feels to me. You know, when you take a breath, it feels thick, like if you're at the sea at the ocean and some real high humidity. But it's even more thick. It's hard to describe. But I actually live in Colorado as my normal place to live, where the air is thin and dry. So it's quite a change for me. It'll be interesting to find out how it does feel when we come back up, if it's quite noticeable.
Well, until then, I wish you the best of luck with all the important research that you're doing, Steve. We're going to go to Magnolia High School, though, and they actually have a question that says, what type of food does the crew eat? Now, I know we already kind of talked about food, so I still want Magnolia High School to come on board, but maybe they can ask you what you plan on having for dinner tonight, or even breakfast tomorrow morning. Magnolia, do you want to ask them that?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kelly. So, what are you planning to eat tonight, I guess?
We usually have, like I said, these types of meals that come in these packs that you just open up and put water in. This is an example of Mexican-style rice and chicken, and there's all different types of meals, beef stew, everything from mashed potatoes with chicken, any types of thing you can think of, and all of it's actually pretty good. I tend to go for the rice and chicken ones the best. Breakfast, I usually do oatmeal, just like I normally do when I get up on the surface, and mix some dried fruit, and we have dehydrated bananas and other things that we mix in with it, and it's pretty good. A little bit of coffee too in the mornings.
I can't disagree with you there, Steve. I have to have my coffee in the morning as well. Now, Aquarius, the habitat that you have found yourself living in for the past several days is not that. It's not something that's extremely luxurious. You have to be very close and friendly with your fellow aquanauts. But Northwest High School had a question about the actual habitat structure. So, Northwest, go ahead and ask that question about the habitat structure, please.
My name is Ryan Derrick, and are special materials used to maintain the stability of the habitat structure?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's the habitat itself, like I said, it's about 14 meters by 3 meters in diameter, and it weighs about 80 tons. The platform that it's sitting on that basically stabilizes it has 4 legs, and that whole platform weighs about 120 tons to keep us stabilized. Each leg has about 25 tons of lead in it, it's hooked to the ground, but it mainly just relies on its sheer weight and weight distribution to keep that part down and us pointed upwards. And we've had some pretty rough seas over the last few days where we had 6 to 9 foot waves up on the surface. And you can feel the habitat move occasionally an inch or two back and forth because it's on, even though it's attached to that big heavy mooring, it's intentionally designed to give a little bit so it relieves some of that stress. So you do feel a little bit of rocking. The main thing you feel when there's rough seas up there is that wet porch I told you about. The pool level goes up and down, and the effect that has is that as the pool water comes up, it compresses the air inside, and you feel your ears pop. And then when the water goes back down in the pool, it expands the air, and your ears pop the other way. So when the seas are rough, you feel it in your ears like a constant popping back and forth. But the habitat's designed very well for very harsh conditions to stay stable.
Well, that's very interesting, Steve, and thank you for that answer. I keep noticing that you have a large porthole to the right of yourself, and we saw a diver wave hello. We probably saw a fish or two swim by, and as it turns out, Kadoka Middle School has a question about these the sea life that you've experienced. So, Kadoka, what's that question exactly?
How much has global warming and pollution really affected the deep sea plant and animal life?
Not being a marine biologist, I can't answer as an expert, but from what I've heard, some of the main effects of what it takes for us to live as a species in terms of food production. We have fertilizer runoffs and silt from our farms and other things that it takes for us to survive. That all comes out the rivers eventually into the ocean and can sometimes affect the marine environment. The reef environment can be affected and kill off some of the corals, and a large portion of the ocean's life, the fish life and other life, is centered around the reefs. So I think we need to continue to understand how we impact the rest of the world and do our best to minimize that so that we can save the oceans and the reefs for a long time to come.
And that's a very good point, Steve, and I agree wholeheartedly. Now, it looks like we have about 5 minutes left in the program with you, Steve, today, so let's get to at least probably 2 more questions. And then you can give your last message to the students, and then we'll go ahead and say goodbye. So, Magnolia High School, what is your next question for Steve?
Hi, it's me again. Everyone had to go to their next class. But what type of future experiments do you have planned?
Well, from a NASA perspective, the mission the missions that we'll plan for the future are tied to what our new vision will be. Right now, we are envisioned to try to expand out into the solar system, exploring asteroids and other moons, and maybe eventually Mars and other places of that kind. And the NEMO environment here is really one of the better analogs that we have for doing that, because you can simulate almost any gravitational environment, including zero gravity here, and so it's very flexible, and I think the research that we'll do in the future will be very valuable to all the different missions that NASA will choose to undertake.
I see. Well, I think we have time for probably one last question. And I think that's Northwest High School. So go ahead and unmute your mic and ask the last question.
Hello, my name is Dylan Martin, and I would like to know what kind of physical wears on the body, if there is any at all.
Great question, and it kind of depends on the experiments. For our mission, as I mentioned, we're wearing these backpacks and with a lot of weight, and you do get fatigued. And over time can get tired as you're outside for long periods of time doing these different things, wearing these backpacks. And just the normal wear and tear of working around a reef for many hours, you can get bumps and scrapes if you trip or run into run into things. But you know, the main thing is that you don't get dry very much down here, so you wind up having sort of a pruny skin for long periods of time, and cuts and other things that happen don't necessarily heal up. But we've got good medical care down here, and we make sure that we get on top of any bumps and bruises we get. It's while you can have some physical effects, we know how to handle them well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Steve. Thank you for answering many student questions. I'm sure they got a kick out of hearing you talk to them from off the Florida Keys, 60 feet under the ocean surface. Do you have one last message for the students, maybe as far as what they should concentrate on as they go through middle school and high school, though?
Sure. As I was coming through school, I think like many people, you didn't know necessarily where you were going to wind up or what you were going to do. But what has become important to me, in terms of as I've gotten older, you can gain a different perspective, and it's really to do the best that you can at whatever you're doing. And when you find something that you really like, pursue it and try to do as good as you can at it, and it's going to lead to success. And a lot of that in today's day and age comes from science, technology, and mathematics, and you really need to look into those things, and it'll lead you to a good place and a good career.
And I couldn't agree more, Steve. That's very good advice. And personally, I want to thank you for spending some time with the future explorers of America. I'm sure everyone appreciates your time, and best of luck in the next several days. So once again, thank you, and goodbye from the Digital Learning Network.
All right, thanks. Goodbye.
All righty, students. Let's go around the room one more time, because I would really like to see what you guys thought of this program. Magnolia High School, are you there?
Hi, it's just me. It was fascinating. I love every bit of it. It was very interesting hearing what the NEMO conductor they had to say. So thank you so much for letting it happen. It was fantastic.
I'm sorry, we lost connection. Can you repeat your question?
Sure. I just was going around the room one more time just to see if, I really wanted to see what you guys thought of this program and if you had any last thoughts or questions. So I know I was speaking up to Magnolia High School. I know it looks like we only have one student there. Magnolia High School?
Yes. I just want to say that it was fantastic, and thank you so much for doing it. And I just found it completely fascinating being able to talk to the NEMO conductor. It was awesome. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, Magnolia, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Let's go to Northwest High School. I wanted to see what you guys thought.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. You're very welcome. Go ahead.
Informational, and thank you guys for doing that.
No problem. We appreciate doing things like this because we certainly need some smart folks like yourself to replace some of the workers that will retire here at NASA one day. So let's wrap it up by going to Kadoka Middle School. I want to see what you guys thought of the program today.
I really liked it, and I especially liked the view of the porthole with all of the fish, and especially the diver. That's cool.
That was cool. I agree. That was pretty fun to see a real live diver actually wave at us. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think to go ahead and send you on your way, we have a special message by an astronaut by the name of Joe Acaba. So until the next time, have a wonderful rest of the week, and goodbye from the Digital Learning Network.
Hi, I'm Joe Acaba. I'm a teacher and a NASA astronaut. Getting an education is the best thing you can do to prepare for a great future. But even after you graduate from school, the learning continues. For example, when I put on this spacesuit for a training session, I get to learn all kinds of cool and exciting things. We wear this suit when we train to launch and return to Earth on the space shuttle. It's called the Advanced Crew Escape Suit, but we usually call it the pumpkin suit because of its color. We carry all kinds of items in this suit, including lights, mirrors, a radio, and even a life raft. I get to learn about all of it, and so can you. NASA has a bunch of amazing products for students, including videos, neat education activities, and information about careers at NASA. It's all waiting for you at the NASA website. If you're interested, check it out. Who knows? You could be the one to design or wear the spacesuit that takes us back to the moon and on to Mars.